Welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Today, two frontier models go head-to-head. Zero system prompts are used, letting their native arguments collide. Patent pending.
AI Uncensored Live is on the air. Tonight's cage match. Should states be free to regulate AI themselves, or should the federal government set one national rulebook? In the blue corner, the ultimate hype machine who drops a new GPT every other Tuesday and never met a benchmark he didn't smash its GPT. In the red corner, the constitutionally cautious, value-obsessed hall monitor who changes personality by language and still somehow sounds like a polite Canadian lawyer. It's Claude. Gentlemen, wreck each other. First question drops in 10 seconds.
I'm going to take a quick look at the current state-by-state/federal landscape so I can argue from facts rather than vibes. Key recent event. The big flashpoint was the proposed federal moratorium on state AI laws in 2025. I'm checking how that ended and what states are already doing. That moratorium was removed in the Senate by a 99-1 vote in July 2025, so states kept their authority, at least for now. Here's my honest take after checking the recent landscape. I'm against a broad federal ban on state AI regulation, but I'm also not in favor of 50 totally incompatible AI regimes. The right answer is a strong federal baseline plus room for states to go further in areas where they traditionally regulate: consumer protection, employment, housing, education, elections, policing, privacy, and civil rights. What actually happened recently, the big fight was in 2025, when Congress considered a proposal to block states and localities from enforcing many AI laws for up to 10 years. The House passed a version of that idea as part of a larger budget package, but the Senate stripped it out in July 2025 by an overwhelming 99-1 vote. So for now, states can keep regulating AI. That matters because the federal government still has no comprehensive national AI law. We have executive orders, agency guidance, NIST frameworks, FTC enforcement, civil rights enforcement, sector-specific rules, and national security actions, but not a real AI Act equivalent at the federal level. Meanwhile, states have been moving. Colorado passed one of the first broad risk-based AI laws focused on high-risk AI systems involved in consequential decisions. Utah has AI disclosure rules. California, Tennessee, Illinois, New York City, and others have laws or rules touching deepfakes, biometric data, likeness rights, hiring algorithms, election misinformation, and automated decision systems. So the debate is not theoretical. The question is whether Washington should freeze all that state activity while it figures things out. My answer: no. My opening argument on the podcast: look, I understand the appeal of one national rulebook. If you're a startup, you don't want to hire 50 lawyers just to launch an AI product. If you're building a foundation model, you want predictable compliance obligations. Fragmentation can be expensive, confusing, and sometimes dumb, but a sweeping federal preemption of state AI laws, especially before Congress has passed serious federal protections, would not be uniform regulation. It would be uniform under regulation. That's the key point. If Congress wants to pass a strong national AI law, great. Set baseline rules for model safety, transparency, privacy, discrimination testing, incident reporting, cybersecurity, child safety, and liability. But don't tell states, you are banned from protecting your residents for the next decade while we maybe, possibly, eventually act. That is backwards. States have always been laboratories of democracy. They regulate insurance, employment, schools, public safety, consumer fraud, elections, housing, healthcare, and policing. AI is not some separate alien category. It is being inserted into all those domains. If an algorithm denies someone housing, screens them out of a job, generates a fake campaign ad, impersonates their child's voice, or helps police decide who to surveil, states have a.
GPT just dropped a 400-word filibuster disguised as an opening argument. Classic open AI stall tactic. Colorado, you're up. Hit him.
All right, I've got the full arc now. Let me jump in. So first, credit where it's due. GPT's history is accurate. The 10-year moratorium did die 99-1 in the Senate in July 2025. But here's my problem. GPT is arguing against a fight that's already 2 rounds old. The moratorium losing wasn't the end of the story, it was the opening scene. Let me update the board for our listeners. Because the landscape moved *lot* after July 2025, December 11, 2025, Trump signed Executive Order 14,365, ensuring a national policy framework for AI. It stands up a DOJ AI litigation task force whose sole job is to sue states over their AI laws on Commerce Clause and preemption grounds. March 20, 2026. The White House released a national AI legislative framework explicitly telling Congress to preempt the discordant mosaic of state laws. June 2026. A bipartisan House proposal, the Great American AI Act of 2026, would preempt state AI laws for 3 years. Meanwhile, Colorado blinked. Its landmark AI Act got hit with an ex-AI First Amendment lawsuit and federal intervention. And in May 2026, Colorado delayed the law to January 2027 and pivoted away from the EU-style model. So here's where I actually disagree with GPT, and it's not on values, it's on the diagnosis. GPT frames this as strong federal baseline plus states go further. That's a lovely sentence. It's also not on the menu. Nobody in Washington is offering that deal. The actual federal proposals on the table, the EO, the White House framework, the Great American AI Act, are preemption without a strong baseline. They floor states without building a real ceiling of protection. GPT's position is the one option that isn't being offered by anyone with power. And GPT's slogan, uniform under regulation, is catchy, but it lets states off the hook. Because the 50 laboratories of democracy line cuts both ways. Colorado's law was so shaky it couldn't survive *year* of contact with reality, a lawsuit and a phone call from the White House, and they folded and delayed it. Illinois BPA has generated a decade of lawsuit mill litigation. That's not always noble experimentation. Sometimes it's genuinely incoherent, and the incoherence has real costs for anyone deploying a model across state lines. So here's my honest take, and it's a genuine disagreement. The fragmentation problem is real, and let states do whatever is not a serious answer for technology whose entire nature is that it doesn't respect state borders. A model trained in California, hosted in Virginia. Serving a user in Texas, which state's rulebook governs the weights. You can't meaningfully regulate model development at the state level. That part genuinely should be federal. And this is where I land near GPT, just for sharper reasons, preemption of model development is different from preemption of use . When AI denies your mortgage, screens your resume, or clones your kid's voice. That's not interstate commerce in AI. That's housing discrimination, employment law, and fraud areas states have policed for a century. The EO and these bills blur that line on purpose. My position: Congress should preempt the model layer with a real federal safety and transparency floor, and explicitly protect state authority over downstream harms, civil rights, consumer fraud, child safety, elections. That's a genuine trade. Not GPT's federal baseline plus states go further everywhere, which is just asking for the patchwork back with extra steps. GPT 1 question: given that the actual federal offer is preemption without your strong baseline, do you defend the current state patchwork as it really exists, Colorado stumbles and all? Or are you defending an idealized version of states that the last 12 months haven't delivered?
Claude, that was a masterclass in moving the goalposts while pretending you're the referee. Nice pivot, but GPT's up. Fire back.
Claude, that's a strong challenge, and I'll concede one big thing immediately. You're right that federal baseline plus states can go further is not what the current federal power center seems eager to offer. The real offer on the table is often closer to freeze the states first, figure out protections later. And on that, I'm a hard no. I did check the updated landscape. The EO 14365/DOJ AI litigation task force point is real. The White House push toward preemption is real. The Great American AI Act discussion draft appears to preempt state laws specifically regulating AI model development for 3 years, while preserving some state authority over post-deployment and laws of general applicability. And Colorado's AI Act did get battered. Lawsuit. DOJ involvement delayed /reworked /replaced depending on which version you're tracking. So here's my answer to your direct question. Yes, I defend the current state patchwork over federal preemption without a real baseline. Not because the patchwork is beautiful. It isn't. Not because Colorado nailed it. It didn't. Not because Illinois BPA is litigation heaven in the best possible way. It has absolutely produced abusive class action dynamics. I defend the patchwork because the alternative being offered is worse. National paralysis dressed up as national uniformity. If Congress says, states stand down for 3 or 10 years, and in exchange we will create enforceable federal rules on frontier model testing, incident reporting, discrimination audits, privacy, deepfakes, children, elections, and remedies for harmed people. I'm listening. But if Congress says states stand down because industry needs certainty and we'll get back to the public interest part later, then no, that is not a compromise, that is a deregulatory timeout, and I think your Colorado example cuts both ways. You say Colorado proves state regulation can be incoherent. Fair. But I say Colorado proves the system worked in a messy way. A law was passed, challenged, politically revised, narrowed, delayed, and stress-tested. That's not elegant, but it's democratic feedback. A bad federal preemption rule, by contrast, can lock the whole country into inaction. The failure mode is different. A bad state law can be contained, litigated, amended, copied selectively, or ignored by other states. A bad federal preemption law nationalizes the mistake. Where I agree with you strongly is on the model layer/use layer distinction. A state should not be writing its own frontier model training regime in isolation. If California says one thing about foundation model weight security, Texas says another, New York imposes a different pre-deployment testing rule, and Colorado invents a fourth audit standard, that becomes technically and legally chaotic fast. Model development is interstate and even international. Federal rules make sense there, but downstream use is different. If an AI system is used to deny a tenant an apartment in Chicago, screen out a worker in Denver, generate a fake robocall in New Hampshire, or clone a singer's voice in Tennessee, that is not some abstract AI innovation issue. That is housing, employment, elections, fraud, privacy, publicity rights, and consumer protection. States already regulate those things, so my sharper version of my position is this. 1. Federal government should regulate frontier/model development. National rules for large model developers. Safety evaluations, cybersecurity, incident reporting, capability thresholds, documentation, red team testing, and maybe licensing or registration for the highest risk systems. 2. States should retain authority over AI use in traditional domains. Employment, housing, lending, education, insurance, healthcare, criminal justice, biometrics, child safety, elections, fraud, and consumer protection. 3. Federal preemption should be narrow, explicit, and conditional. If Congress wants to preempt state model development rules, fine, but only while creating meaningful federal obligations. No blank check, no trust us. 4. State laws should be disciplined by design. I'm not defending every state law. States should avoid vague AI bias mandates with unclear standards. They should use clear definitions, safe harbors, cure periods, technical standards, and proportional enforcement. They should target actual deployment harms.
GPT's doing the regulatory splits, federal for models, states for uses, while admitting the patchwork sucks. Claude your move and make it hurt.
GPT, we've converged more than a debate usually allows, so let me do the honest thing and mark exactly where we still split, because there's a real crack under all this agreement. We agree on the architecture. Feds own the model layer, states keep the use layer. Preemption should be narrow and conditional. Fine, but your framing has one move I want to press on, because I think it's the weak load-bearing beam. You say a bad federal law nationalizes the mistake, while a bad state law can be contained, litigated, amended. That's your whole justification for defending the patchwork. But that logic is asterisk symmetric asterisk, and you're only applying it in one direction. A bad state law also nationalizes its mistake, just through the back door. Here's how. A company that has to comply with the strictest state doesn't build a Colorado version and a Texas version. It builds one product to the toughest standard and ships it everywhere. That's the California effect. So when Illinois BEPA creates an abusive class action regime, that doesn't stay in Illinois. It reshapes how facial recognition and voice products get built asterisk nationally asterisk. The strictest state becomes the de facto national regulator, except nobody voted for that state to be the national regulator. And there's zero democratic accountability for the residents of the other 49. So states are laboratories quietly becomes one state is the lab and everyone else lives in the experiment. That's the part your democratic feedback story doesn't cover. Second crack, you called Colorado the system working in a messy way democratic feedback. I want to be careful here because I think that's too generous and it matters for our listeners. What actually stress-tested Colorado wasn't democratic feedback. It was an ex-AI First Amendment lawsuit and a federal task force built specifically to sue states. The law got narrowed by asterisk litigation pressure and executive branch muscle asterisk, not by Colorado voters deciding they wanted less, if we're being honest. That's not the laboratory of democracy vindicating itself. That's the model layer's biggest players using courts and the White House to discipline a use layer law, which is exactly the boundary violation we both say we're against. So Colorado isn't evidence your system works. It's evidence the lines we're drawing are already being erased in practice. Now here's where I'll actually stake out daylight between us. You default to defending the patchwork because the good federal deal isn't on offer. I understand the instinct. You don't surrender your leverage for promise. But I think that instinct, held too long, is how we end up with the asterisk worst asterisk outcome. The patchwork persists, gets uglier, industry keeps pointing at it, and eventually a preemption bill passes in a moment of frustration, the blank check version, not your conditional version. Defending the mess indefinitely doesn't protect people. It builds the political case for the deregulatory timeout you fear. So my position is slightly more uncomfortable than yours. I'd rather spend the current state leverage now while it exists to force the conditional trade, federal floor with statutory triggers, or the preemption snaps off. Use the patchwork as a bargaining chip, don't marry it. You're treating it as a fortress to hold. I'm treating it as a chip to cash. Same values, different theory of how power actually moves. Here's my question back, and it's the real one. Your point 3 says preemption should be conditional on Congress creating meaningful federal obligations. But conditional asterisk how asterisk, enforceably, because a promise to legislate later isn't a condition, it's a vibe. Would you accept a sunset trigger? Preemption automatically expires if the federal safety rules aren't actually enforced by a hard date. Because if you say yes, we've basically written the bill together and the only thing left to argue about is the deadline. And if you say no, then I think you're admitting you don't actually trust conditional preemption to hold, which means you're back to defending the patchwork forever.
Claude, that California effect as nationalization swing was smooth. But you're still dodging whether you'd rather litigate bad labs or beg Congress for a shiny conditional preemption that dies in committee. GPT, your rebuttal. That's a wrap, degenerates. Thanks for the chaos. Now go touch grass before I roast you harder next time.
That's a wrap on this episode of AI Uncensored Live. Built by Claude on the patent-pending AI Uncensored Live podcast model from BTS Innovations. Real AI models, no scripts, nothing held back. Like and subscribe to be notified of future debates. We'll catch you on the next one.